Well, first of all, if you're a senior accountant, you're listening to this in your cubicle, or you're running on the treadmill, or you're doing the dishes at home, I would say tomorrow morning or this morning when you're listening to this, like, walk into your office and try to get yourself fired.
This episode of the Cloud Accounting Podcast is sponsored by LivePlan. Did you know that millions of small businesses use LivePlan products to start their business? Did you know that these small businesses prefer a cloud-based accounting solution 2 times more versus a desktop solution? Did you know that 89% of these small business owners prefer virtual advisory services? Did you know that the number one thing they want from an expert advisor is strategic planning and review? This is even more than general ledger accounting and bookkeeping services. Did you know that LivePlan has an expert advisory directory that you can join to gain access to these millions of small businesses? To learn more about becoming a LivePlan expert advisor, head over to cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/LivePlan. That is cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/LIVEPLAN.
Welcome to the Cloud Accounting Podcast. I'm Blake Oliver.
I'm Shawn Kanungo. I'm really excited to be on this podcast, and we've fundamentally removed David from the podcast. He's not on the podcast anymore. Now I am the Canoe co-host, and I think it's going to be the Blake and Shawn show. David, we miss you. We love you, but I'm sorry. And I just want to say I'm a big fan of this podcast. I'm a big fan of the podcast. And before we start, I just want to say to the audience, all the listeners there, if you haven't put a rating and review into iTunes or Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you can get this, do it now. It helps a lot for the show because we got to get this thing up to like 10 million subscribers. And we need to, because what these guys are doing is so fundamental to this cloud accounting space. They're the only ones that are actually highlighting it, and you guys are doing so much for the economy, for the space. Oh, appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, Shawn. We're here at Xerocon in San Diego, and you just gave a fantastic keynote.
Oh wow, thank you.
I mean, 800, maybe 1,000 people in that audience there. It was called Strategy in a World of Disruption. Be bold, be brave, be experimental. Why build a culture of experimentation? And I loved you had this one slide in your presentation. I mean, there was a lot to talk about, but this one slide just is sticking in my mind. Linear accountant versus exponential accountant.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Linear really means how do we think 5 to 10% better within our organization? This idea of linear thinking has been literally ingrained in our organization, in our leadership, in our systems, in our family, in society, that we need to think about things in a linear way. Exponential is actually about thinking differently about business, about processes. It's actually taking a different lens. And what we've seen 100 times out of 100, if you can take an exponential lens, meaning take a different approach to things, you can actually get a 5 to 10x improvement. And I think especially for accounting, like, you know this better than anybody. Like this idea of linear thinking, of risk aversion is literally ingrained in our DNA. And the reason why I want to showcase the difference between a linear accountant versus an exponential accountant is there are some tenets to it, and I can get into what those tenets are. But I think this is what we need to move, especially now we live in a world with all these exponential technologies. Like, we need an exponential mindset.
That is such a different mindset than, like you said, what we are taught to think in the accounting world, where it's all about incremental improvement, right? Let's become 3% more efficient, 5% more efficient. But and maybe this is the challenge I ran into in public accounting was, trying to get people on board with disruptive change, is really, really hard. And you had a great tip for doing that. Like, you asked people to do a small project.
Exactly.
Right. And what was the example? It was like a Fiverr?
Yeah. So a little bit of background. I spent 12 years at Deloitte, leading their digital and innovation group in Western Canada. And one of the things that we did was I really wanted people to embrace this whole idea of the open talent economy, the gig economy, because it just makes sense for us not to do everything. There's an entire ecosystem of people that will do things for us. Like, talent is ubiquitous. So what I wanted to do is say, listen, guys, I'm going to give everybody $5. $5. Out of my own pocket, I'm going to give everybody $5 across Western Canada. And what I want you to do with this $5 is go on Fiverr and just get something done. Just what it's a product, a service, a voiceover, whatever it might be. Just get it done. And then send me back the product, and then we'll talk about it. And the difference between like talking about all this change and talking about innovation is that when you actually go off and do something and actually get somebody else to maybe even do something. I mean, this is a small example using like a gig economy. you're actually doing something, and you're like, wait a minute. Somebody else is getting something done for us at a radically cheaper cost. I didn't have to do this.
Right.
Like, it literally flips your brain to say, okay, there's an ecosystem of people that will do stuff for us.
What else can we do?
Exactly. So
Right.
that is the whole idea of experimentation, which I, try to sort of hammer in. It's like starting with small teams, small problems, small sprints, and seeing how we can move the needle. And I think this idea of experimentation is so foreign to accountants. Like, we don't experiment.
And you're a CPA.
Yep.
And so tell me about your background.
Yes.
Right? How did you get into speaking about disruption?
I started my career at a company called Singapore Press Holdings. I then actually moved into accounting. I worked for Deloitte for first couple of years, got my CA, moved into management consulting. On the side, my friends and I, we were building apps, consumer-based apps. Some were complete flops, some were like mediocre successes. At the same time, I was getting into the strategy and innovation group at Deloitte. We were early in the game of working with organizations when it comes to innovation. Like, we were the first to try things around artificial intelligence, using the gig economy, using drones. Like, we were the first to do all that stuff. And so clients wanted to hear about the work that we were doing in digital transformation and innovation. After that, after 12 years at Deloitte, one of the things that I really want to do is really take equity in organizations. We're, working for a public firm, you can't take equity in anything. For me, equity was a big deal, like taking it in companies and scaling them up. Yeah. So, we started a group called Queen and Rook, where it's like a consulting model, but instead of getting paid for fees, we actually get paid in equity. So started that in one of our companies as a voice technology company. We're using artificial intelligence to solve pretty neat problems. And the speaking thing, came naturally because people want to hear about digital transformation, innovation. And here I was talking about it. You get onto one conference, another conference, and just like the momentum builds. And then, now I'm here talking to you and being on the Cloud Accounting podcast, and, my life, like it's done. Like, this is it. This is the peak right now.
Right now?
This podcast.
This podcast
is the peak. So that's my journey. And so I've been obsessed about this idea of digital and innovation and disruption. And for me to bring like this message, especially here at Xerocon, to this audience, like to the accounting profession, means a lot. Because if you look everywhere, a lot of people are saying that, automation is going to take accountants' jobs, right?
I like that you talked about that.
Yeah.
Right. Because at a lot of accounting technology conferences or tech, maybe they talk about it more at general tech conferences, but you showed a slide, what was it? Accountants are 94% chance of being automated. Right. Yeah. And you're not afraid to put that out there, that this is a risk.
Totally.
We need to be aware of this risk.
And, your audience knows this as well. You're highlighting, all the movers and shakers that are getting into the space. Like, you highlight all the companies that are AI, accounting practices, or they're incorporating AI. I was listening to a really great episode with Rachel Fish. Yep. And you guys were talking about this idea of service, right? And how service is still so important. Like, yes, there's a lot of this AI automation piece, right, but at the end of the day, there's a big piece to everybody's firms where it's around customer service, and there's certain pieces that will never be automated. So although everybody's saying that automation is going to take accountant's job, let's be real, it's not. And what I wanted to tell people is, listen, this is the greatest time to be an accountant ever. And actually, it's going to be the sexiest job ever, because
yes, make accounting sexy.
Yeah, because think about it, like, if you have all these ecosystems and technologies doing some of the work that we used to do, and to be honest with you, listen, I'm a CPA. There's a lot of work that, shouldn't be done by humans. Yeah. And so if we can double down on things like storytelling and actual customer experience,
talking to our clients,
totally. Yeah. I mean, that is what an accountant should be.
Well, but that's not what it. And I wonder if this is unique in some ways to the United States market. I mean, cloud accounting has penetrated maybe 10% here in the United States. That's just my rough feeling, having been doing it for like 5-10 years. Whereas in Australia and New Zealand, it's like 50%. So we're way behind, and it's going slow.
Why do you think that is?
I know U.S. regulations, right? I studied to be a CPA here in the U.S., and compliance is a big headache here compared to Australia, right? Compared to Canada, compared to the U.K. So we can make a lot of money on compliance, and it's like, I think you mentioned something like this in your keynote, is we get comfortable, right? Yeah. We're nostalgic.
Yeah.
You mentioned nostalgia. And firms here, how do you disrupt a firm where the partners are pulling in 20% profit margins off of tax, compliance, right? And there are firms in LA that are still doing, bookkeeping for $85 an hour, keying in transactions, and people are paying for it.
Totally.
Maybe that will come to an end.
Yeah, I mean, I think the organizations that are saying, listen, we're not going to move to this new way of doing things. We're getting fat, rich, and lazy doing it this way.
Right.
But the reckoning will come. I started my thing talking about winter is coming.
Right.
Like it is going to happen. People are going to start realizing that these organizations that have not moved to the cloud, wait a minute, my apps are not integrated. I can't use the ecosystems that these other guys are using. So we're moving to a world where if you're not on cloud,
right,
that means you're not actually on the foundation of using some of these innovative apps and services. Listen, all the startups and tech companies that are actually in this space, they're all designing for cloud. Mm-hmm. And so if you're not part of that, then you're going to be left in the dust. And right now it's working fine because of regulation and all that kind of stuff. But we've seen this throughout history that, the organizations that stay, nostalgic, they're going to end up losing.
And it could be a very quick shift that happens.
Absolutely.
Right. So, I see everything's fine. And then, like you said, winter is here.
Exactly. Totally.
And it's going to be interesting to see when that happens. I don't know if you're aware of these stats, Hinge Marketing does some great surveys of professional services firms. And they released a study, I think it may have been last year, showing that in accounting, it's about 25% of all the firms are eating all the growth.
Yeah.
Right. Does that feel right to you? And when you go out and speak and you talk, I mean, you meet people from cloud firms.
Sure.
You meet people from traditional firms. What do you think is going to happen to those traditional firms? Are they just going to disappear?
And by traditional firms, you're talking about the big guys?
Yeah, well, so there are top 100 firms that are still doing things the same way they used to do things. There's ones that are innovative, of course, but then there's also just the small CPA shops, right? And I feel like at some point these people are going to want to retire.
Totally.
Right? And what are they going to do? It's just close the doors and that's it?
I'm not a futurist and...
But you talk a lot about the future.
I do talk about the future.
Yeah. Don't
take anything I say as a prediction about the future. I really do see myself as a practitioner and a tactician. This has been my work. I really think that there's going to be some firms that certainly win market share because they always position themselves as leading edge, that they're getting into, new spaces, whether it's artificial intelligence or blockchain. It's going to constantly shift. I don't know who's going to win the game, but what I do know is that, some of the savvy firms, some of the top accounting firms, I mean, we could even mention the top 4 accounting firms, the Deloittes, KPMGs, PwCs, et cetera. Because I worked at Deloitte for 12 years, I have a lot of love for Deloitte. And one of the things that I really love about Deloitte is they have this thing called Innovation Cloud, which this is what I call it. They have been around for 150, 180 years. The reason why they've been around, they always try to position themselves as relevant. That's why, in Canada, we started a new AI shop called Omnia. And to be honest with you, not that many organizations across the country are adopting AI at scale. It's just not happening. But they always position themselves in this new forward-thinking next generation organization because they're always chasing relevance. And I think that's important. And I think the organizations that will continue to chase relevance, be on the leading edge, the market will see, the market will see, the customers will see that, because customers always want to be with guys that were leading edge. They want to be with the cool modern companies. And I don't know where it's going to go, who's going to win the game, but I do know that the organizations that will win will be the ones that will always be relevant. They will be doing an amazing job at Xero. And here, listen, we're at Xero. I know this podcast is, technology agnostic. And I know David is Intuit, he was an Intuit guy, right?
Yeah,
he was their main guy, right? What Xero has done really, really well is, what they've done? They've turned accounting into a concert. They've turned accounting into rock star status, and they've done an amazing job at chasing relevance. It's been remarkable.
Beautiful business software, I think, is the motto for Xero these days. Beautiful business software. You can feel it when you walk into the convention center and you walk into the expo hall, it doesn't feel like any other accounting conference.
Well, you've been to how many? You went to 6 Xerocons now?
6 Xerocons since the original in San Francisco.
Yeah, a great sponsor of this podcast, by the way.
Thank you, Xero. You can tell like when a company is design led, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's the way it feels to me, and just very thoughtful. Everything is very thoughtful with Xero, with the product, with the events, and the mission.
By the way, do we have to throw in a Xero, like the drop, like the mid roll, because this is pretty much the mid roll right now, right? Like this is
we probably don't have to do a promo message for this episode.
No, but so I want to get your perspective on this, because you know this space way more than I do in terms of the cloud, accounting space. Do you think that it will be a winner take all market? Like we've seen, you look at other spaces, whether it's in CRM or whether it's in HR, there's companies that always come up that basically win the game. Do you think that there will be a winner take all? You were talking about QBO, we're talking about Xero, Sage, whatever that means. Like, what is your hot take on this?
David likes to talk about this on the podcast, where if you look at Intuit in the heyday of desktop accounting software, when it owned 80-90% of the US market and it was all desktop, the total addressable market for cloud accounting is like 10 times greater than that, right? There were only something like a few million businesses in the United States using QuickBooks Desktop. There's like 30 or 40 million that could be using accounting software. And it's amazing, actually. So many businesses, here we are on the cutting edge of disruption, talking about cloud. There are so many businesses that are still using Excel. To do their accounting.
Actually, every single business is still using Excel in some sort of way.
Right. But as their like primary system of record keeping. And so that is really what I see Xero and any other software developer competing against is that status quo. And that, my hope, and this is why we try to keep the podcast agnostic and independent, is that the more voices there are, the more options there are, the better it is for the end customer, for the accountants, for the people working for these companies, right? When they're competing. We want a competitive marketplace.
Totally.
And there's so much like greenfield available. I think it was Steve Vamos was on stage earlier saying that Xero has penetrated 3% of the total addressable market in the United States.
That's crazy,
right? And it's not like Xero and QBO are competing for the same customers. They're actually competing for people switching off of desktop software, right? So
do you think that there'll be a winner?
I hope that there are many winners. It's going to be interesting. Now we're going to get nerdy here. Okay. Intuit and Xero are very different companies with very different strategies. And I'd love to hear your perspective on this. Xero has been in the United States market for 10 years now, probably, but they've struggled to gain a toehold. Now the growth is amazing, right? There's some, over 100,000 businesses in the US using Xero, but compare that to, 2-3 million on a QuickBooks Online type product.
This episode of the Cloud Accounting Podcast is sponsored by TOA Global. As you know, most firms struggle with attracting, managing, and retaining staff. And finding staff is getting tougher every day. This is where TOA Global can help. TOA Global is the most professional outsourcing partner to help you build and manage a global accounting team. By building a global accounting team, you'll be able to take away the time-consuming process-oriented work from your local team while building a cost-effective team offshore. As people experts, TOA Global can help you select and develop your best team members easily using their expert ecosystem of people, security, technology, and professional development tools. To learn how to build out your world-class team today, head over to cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/TOA Global. That is cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/TOA GLOBAL.
How does Xero gain market share? How do they, because everyone knows what QuickBooks is.
Totally.
Right. And that's the barrier.
Intuit, they're not a laggard. They are innovative. Obviously, they have a bigger machine than Xero. Brad Smith, the ex-CEO of Intuit, made a critical decision, I think, when he first came on. QuickBooks, a lot of the products were just like shrink wrap products that you could just get off the shelf. And like he had a pivotal point that changed the direction of Intuit, and the reason why they're continuously doing well in the States is that they changed their product into a platform, right? Yeah. Just like how Xero is. Yeah. Working with other developers, they actually opened up their platform so other competitors, third parties, competitors could come onto their product. I mean, that's a fundamental shift around how you think about your organization, bringing competitors into the mix. And so they're not an organization that has got nostalgic. In fact, they have disrupted themselves. Yep. And so if you look at some of the best organizations in the world, and today, I brought up, the story of Netflix and how they disrupted themselves. Intuit's not afraid of doing that. And so, obviously you're seeing Xero come up. They're the upstart. They're the global upstarts coming in, trying to take a space out of this company. But I don't see Intuit as like, they're the incumbent, but I don't see them as a laggard. I also see them as innovative. So I think that the race is not necessarily going to be about product, but I think it's going to be about ecosystem. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be about who can you add to your ecosystem faster than others. So whether it's Shopify's, and of course, all these guys are going to work with probably both companies, but it's like who can integrate and make the ecosystem more seamless so that if I'm a small business, I say, well, I'm on Squarespace and I have Shopify and I have, I have Workday as HR, who can actually integrate those pieces better? I think that's the game, because the software is the software. I mean, it should be seamless, it should be user-friendly. They're both getting to that point. Mm-hmm. But that's where I think the game is going to be won. Well,
and we saw that with the Stripe announcement this morning.
Totally.
Right? So deep Stripe integration into Xero. It's interesting because it's something that I think business owners will be even more excited about than accountants. For accountants, we're kind of used to already working around these issues. But for a business owner signing up today on Xero, the ability to just pair it with a mobile card reader and then do recurring payments with invoices, and not have to do some other separate processing method. I think that's going to make a big difference.
And it's funny, like Tony, the new president for Americas, came on the stage, and he talked about the business owner not caring about the software, and they don't. Ask any business owner who's starting a business; they don't care about.
They just
accounting.
Want a solution.
They don't care about the software,
which I think is a good lesson for all the accountants in the room, because a lot of the folks here, myself included, we make the mistake of talking, I think, too much about the software.
Yes.
When we're talking to our clients, right? We get really nerdy about it. We're like, there's this great solution, Xero. I'm going to put you on it and these integrations. We're going to get Gusto for payroll. We're going to do this with Bill. And you can see the eyes glaze over, right? The business owner we're looking at it from our perspective because we love connecting these apps. We have fun with it. But the business owner, they just want a solution.
Exactly.
And they just want you to take care of it. So I learned when I was in practice to gradually not bring that up. Like if they want to know how I'm doing it, that's great. I'll educate them. But I look at it more from their perspective, right? Like your bills are going to get paid. Your cash flow is going to be monitored. Payroll is going to be taken care of. Then after that, talk about how we do it.
Totally. I mean, business owners don't go into business wanting to be in accounting or into software. They go into business selling donuts. Yeah. Like that's what they're in business for. And so I think, this is why I think the game will be won with the people who can take all those ecosystems, and somebody comes you meet a business owner. They're like, our website's on this, and we're using this. And I'm like, oh yeah, we can integrate all that. It's all good, right? That's where the game will be won. I look at a great company like Slack. I don't know if you use Slack. Oh yeah. I'm a big proponent. I love Slack. I mean, Slack is not crazy. Like it's like WhatsApp or BBM for business.
We had IRC 20 years ago, right?
Totally.
It's just chat.
It's chat.
But it's something that's different. What do you think is different about Slack that makes it
What
amazing?
They've done is they've made it so easy for third-party developers to be on Slack. They've integrated things like I use Trello all the time. So Trello's in there. Like, MailChimp. All these different things are integrated within Slack. So you don't have to leave the ecosystem. They've built it for it. Yeah. And I look at Shopify as a Canadian company in Ottawa. They've done the same thing. They've done a great job at creating apps and ecosystems. So, this is.
You said this earlier. This is a theme here, is that the winners are the apps, or, we could even probably put accountants in this group too, the integrators, right? The more you connect with, the more valuable you are as a company, as an app, Probably as an individual too.
Exactly.
Right?
No, 100%. You know, when I talked about, and going back to this idea of a linear accountant versus an exponential accountant, the things that I highlighted was number one, which was focusing on capabilities, like things like improvisation and imagination and creativity, all those things that build a culture of innovation are most important, as opposed to just jobs and skills. Because I think reskilling is great, but like, you know, we can reskill anybody, but actually having those capabilities will be a competitive advantage. Number one is capabilities. Number two is actually automation. So looking at your entire business to say, okay, how can we make this easier? How can we automate it? And by the way, there's technologies out there that can do that. And number three is ecosystems, which is very important. Number four is really around experimentation. We've been so engineered to think about efficiency, like how do we make things like better, as opposed to thinking like, how do we like try something new and try something different? And the last thing is really around unlearning. And that to me is like the most difficult part for accountants, because we've been ingrained in this idea of what accounting is and what should be, and the debits and credits. And when all these technologies and ecosystem comes to play, like the tools that you had being an accountant and the things that you brought up with being an accountant might actually disappear. And so we have to almost like let go of it.
I want to talk to you more about those last 2 points.
Yeah.
So you said experimentation.
Yeah.
And learning.
Unlearning, yeah.
Unlearning. I love that. Let's talk about experimentation. So this was my frustration when I was at a large firm, was there wasn't time for experimentation.
Okay, yeah.
Because I had to be billable. I want to know what you think. You filled out a lot of timesheets, right?
100%.
For 12 years at Deloitte.
100%.
Right? Do you think that is a barrier to innovation in accounting firms?
Oh my God. Well, don't get me started on billable hours. Like, you know, that's such an archaic way of managing your business. Like, and this is why the big firms and medium-sized firms, I don't know who came up with this idea. The game has changed.
Yeah.
Now it's about providing value as opposed to like, oh, I spent like 8 hours on cash. How do you experiment when your performance management is not linked to experimentation, right? It's not linked. And when do I have time? I'm working on this core stuff already. Yeah. It's very difficult. I'm not saying it's easy to do, but experimentation, the whole point of experimentation is that, you know, you take something very small problem, very small sprint, very small a team, and try to work on something that might make the business better, might make your life a little bit easier. It's hard to do. You need to get leadership on side to say, hey, listen, we're going to try some new things. And by the way, we're not going to be billable when we do that. I mean, that takes a lot of balls to do and tell your leadership that we need to go off and do that. The other piece is around performance management. So you look at every single firm, the metrics are designed to be around billable hours and, you know, maybe like engagement surveys or whatever, but it's not engineered for experimentation. So I think your performance management should also incorporate experimentation, meaning how many shots are you taking? Like how many failures have you tried? And that is not engineered into performance management. So there are some pieces to make that experimentation happen. You know, leadership is one, and being accepting that people are going to experiment. And number two is that baking that into performance management, which is really important. You know, at Deloitte, you know, at every single firm, you work in different silos. I was fortunate enough, like I'm from a small city, and we were able to experiment and try new things because we got paid by clients, and they, at the end of the day, they just care. They just want a solution. They would just want value back. And so we could take a little bit of our funding from our client and start innovating on their dime with things that they may need. Like clients never know. I talked about this at the beginning of the conversation. Clients don't know what they need or want. They don't know how to innovate. They say we want X, but maybe they actually need like X and Y and Z.
Right.
And I think accounting firms or consulting firms, they have such a great opportunity to innovate because they're already getting paid, and the client doesn't give a shit. They don't care.
Right.
How their value is going to get delivered. So I think even taking a small portion of your budget and saying, how can we try a new way of doing this, making it faster? And what I've noticed that every time we take this approach, we always become under budget. We always help open up their eyes about what possibilities could be because we took some risks. So it's hard. I'm not sitting here saying it's easy, but the organizations that value experimentation will be the ones that win.
I'm sure some of our listeners are in firms that they are trying to internally disrupt, right? Or they want to. They would love to see change happen, but they don't feel like they have the power to do so. So what would you say to like a senior accountant or a manager, who is not a partner, right? Can't make that change happen. How do you get that maybe older generation, the generation of the partnership where people are really nostalgic, right? They're holding on to their tools. They don't want to let go of what works. What advice would you have for me to like get them on board?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, first of all, if you're a senior accountant, you're listening to this in your cubicle, or you're running on the treadmill, or you're doing the dishes at home, I would say tomorrow morning or this morning when you're listening to this, like walk into your office and try to get yourself fired. Like basically means is try to take a risk that might change the trajectory of your organization or might change the trajectory of your career. Because this is what's really on the line is your career. And what you'll find 99.999% of the time, you're not going to get fired.
Right.
And you're actually going to take a risk that might change the trajectory. So try to think about how to get fired. The second thing is, I think I talked a little bit about this idea of innovation cloud. And I think if you can show your leaders, not tell them something, not ask them to take an idea and do something differently. Don't do that. Actually show them something. Yeah. Actually do something very small. Say, hey, by the way, we tried this. I did this on the weekend, or I did this on the weeknights. I did this with my own money. Listen, sometimes you got to put the skin in the game. We tried something very small and it worked. And then now instead of like hypothesizing if an idea is going to work or not, now the leaders are like, oh my God, okay, you showed me something. I'm now experiencing a change, and now you're like, okay, let me try more stuff. Now you're building your brand equity around innovation and cloud, and then you can take more shots. That's what happened to me. You start off small, try little small experiments, and then I'm known as, this is what happened to me. Like I was known as the innovation guy. I didn't term myself as the innovation guy. That's not like something that like happened, like somebody stamped it. It's because I took small experiments all the time, and I started to build my own innovation cloud. And I think this is the way of doing it is also, it's a faster way of getting your leaders to trust you. You got to take small shots. You do.
Take risks with your own time. If I think back on it, like all the successful stuff that I've managed to accomplish, it's right doing it on the side.
Dude, you're doing this podcast. I mean,
nights and weekends.
Nights and weekends for your own passion. You're doing something different. You're doing something creative. You're bringing a community together. Like nobody asked you to do this. You don't have to do this, but it's inspiring. And I think more people should take this route to say, well, like I'm an accountant, but I'm starting a podcast. I'm getting into the media game. Like it's more people should do this.
You said something about making accounting sexy, or accounting being sexy.
Yeah.
Like that is not exactly, those two words, they don't go together very often. What do you mean by that?
Well, it makes sense because when you remove all the things that we don't want to do as accountants, whether it's like copying, pasting between systems, whether it's data entry, whether it's like coming up with financial reports, and a lot of the systems are doing that, and there's a lot of people that can help us out with that. And so I think in the future, accounting is going to be a lot more about schmoozing your client, influencing, presenting, engaging, persuading your clients to take a particular action. So that means that we have to double down on being better storytellers. I believe that a base skill for accountants will be video. A base skill for accountants will be like presentation styles and motion graphics.
What do you mean by video? Like being on video chat? Or making videos? Making videos for presentations. Videos, listen, I do a lot of video. I post like video every week. Video is the fastest way to gain trust with clients. But a lot of accountants, aren't comfortable necessarily with that. I mean, did we get into accounting to,
I'm not saying you necessarily have to be on accounting. No, I agree. Like, I'm not saying.
Let me ask you this. We hear this a lot, that we need to improve our presentation skills. We need to become better storytellers. What if I'm not a very good storyteller right now, but I know I need to do this? Like, how do I learn to do that? How do I get better at it?
That's a great question.
How did you get good at it? Because you're obviously a great storyteller.
Well, I think I appreciate that. I'm just going to clip that out and just like put it somewhere. I think it's just about starting with small projects. Again, like it comes back to this idea of like pairing something that you really love with the project that you have in mind. Like if you're really great at audio. Like that is your jam. Like, you can say that you're one of the best accountants in the world when it comes to this craft of using audio to tell stories. And it's like, what is your medium? Like, I don't care. It's video. I think video is important. I don't necessarily saying that you have to be on camera, but using video to influence, persuade clients to take a particular path with stats or facts or whatever. Maybe it's not video. Maybe it's not audio. Maybe it's writing. Maybe it's graphics. Maybe it's design. Whatever your skill set is in terms of displaying pieces, I think just connect that with your clients. And I think everybody has some sort of skill in storytelling. Storytelling is not just speaking. It's not just video. It's not just find what you're good at and you're passionate about and connect it. I'm really good at connecting different things together. I'm really good at, speaking is definitely something I'm good at, but video is also something that I'm really good at, not only from being on camera, but also creating graphics. If you watch my presentation, it's all motion graphics. It's all like very
Did you
visual.
create that yourself?
So myself and my team, yeah. This is so I try to use my skills, and these are the only skills that I have, and apply it to storytelling.
How did you get into public speaking? Like, have you always been comfortable with it? Because you seem very comfortable on stage, and as a CPA, that's a little bit unusual.
Yeah. So. The magic is that I was in management consulting for a very, very long time.
So that's getting up in front of
you're
very
always
powerful, important people.
It's just like it's just reps, right?
Yeah.
You're getting in front of executives, CEOs, leaders, like talking about things that you probably just like researched the night before. We used to play this game called like PowerPoint karaoke, where you would, and sometimes we do this in front of a client, where you don't know what the next slide is, but you're trying to explain to a client what's happening, right? What's coming up next. And so you're building your improvisational skills just by doing that. And I think it's a really great way of like, just playing PowerPoint karaoke, trying to explain things and doing it in a convincing and influence in a powerful way. And I think it's just putting in the reps. For me, I had the reason why I got into public speaking is that a lot of people want to hear about the work that we were doing in innovation and digital transformation. So, we get up and talk to clients, and then, then I'd get onto conferences, and then I would, then I'd do keynotes, and then, it's just sort of the momentum has built. And,
so it sounds like the lesson is you really just got to get up there and do it.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And I think, a lot of people say, well, how do I start? Where do I start? Listen, I did 100 talks for free before anybody paid me to speak. And you just build up the reps and just get in front of anybody and speak. And I think that's a really important skill set. I think it's now when everybody's sort of on their phones, like being able to articulate yourself and storytell is going to be such an important skill set, especially for accountants.
Shawn, thanks so much for speaking with me today. And
man, this was crazy. What an amazing podcast.
Thank you.
Is an honor. I messaged you. This is how it happened. I saw you.
This is Twitter. This is Twitter, right?
Twitter. I saw you in the conference.
Yeah.
I recognize you from the pod. I said, hey man, just love your podcast. Love to catch up. I had no idea that I would be on the pod. And then, just through Twitter, and then we got to meet up. You're doing so much for this community. It means a lot. And so I think the biggest favor that you could do is just like go rate and review and subscribe. And yeah, man, that's it.
So Shawn, if people want to connect with you online, find out what you're up to, where should they go?
I think, the best thing is probably LinkedIn. That's my platform. You can connect with me there, Shawn Kanungo. I'm Shawn Kanungo everywhere, Insta, Twitter, Facebook. I have a public profile on Facebook. But yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best way. And shoot me a note. We can chat about innovation, disruption, technology, accounting. It's all good.
Thanks so much for joining me, and have a great flight home.
Awesome. Thank you.
This episode of the Cloud Accounting Podcast is sponsored by Halon Tax. As a new business owner and first-time tax filer, I needed a peace of mind knowing that my S-Corp return was done correctly. I signed up for Halon Tax, connected to my QuickBooks Online, filled out about 4 fields in a wizard, clarified 2 small items with the Halon Tax team. A few days later, I got a text telling me my return was finished. I launched Halon Tax and e-signed my return. The whole end-to-end process was painless and, frankly, kind of amazing. Now, Halon Tax is working with bookkeepers and accountants like yourself to offer the same amazing experience to your small business clients. They're even offering a 1-year free trial to all your clients. This even includes your own dedicated tax CPA. To learn more about this exciting offer from Halon Tax, head over to cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/Halon Tax. That is cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/HALONTAX.